Hello, and welcome to She Rises, the podcast where women in leadership take center stage. I'm Tiffany-O, your host and the founder of Virtual Partner, where we champion humanity in the workplace to build thriving organizations. With over 30 years of experience in change management and servant leadership, I'm here to bring you powerful stories, actionable insights, and inspiring conversations with trailblazing women who are breaking barriers and redefining success. Whether you're climbing the corporate ladder, leading your own venture, or looking for that next level of impact, this is your space to learn, to grow, and to rise. Let's dive in.
Today, I'm uber excited to have the Tammy Alvarez join us on She Rises, our season 1 episodes. Of course, with the theme, my 25-year-old self, so we'll be digging into that. Tammy is the CEO of the Career Winner Circle and the author of Escaping the Career Trap, which you can find at escapingthecareertrap.com. With a career that began on Wall Street, Tammy will tell you that she's transformed not just her experiences into powerful lessons, but for that of others as well. She's dedicated to helping individuals and organizations break free from constraints of what we call conventional career paths and achieve unprecedented success. And her unique insights, which I'm sure you'll all agree with, into aligning personal ambition with the business goals have made her a sought-after speaker and coach. And I am so honored to have her with me. Let's dive into her journey and discover the transformative insights she has to share. Welcome, Tammy.
I am so excited to be here, and I am so proud of all the things that you're doing and how you are just paving the way for women in leaders. So thanks for including me, and I'm just beyond thrilled and proud to be here.
Oh my goodness. So Tammy, can I tell the story of us?
You can.
Okay, so for those of you who are watching, I just need to digress for a moment. Tammy was my executive coach. I hired her when I got my first VP role, and I needed to have someone at my side. At the time, I was struggling with imposter syndrome, whether or not I belonged there, and whether or not I would have the strength and confidence to do the things that I know I needed to do. And so I hired an executive coach. And Tammy helped me never feel like I was over my skis. And then the magic happened. She brought me to the Career Winner Circle as one of her executive coaches, and we had an amazing time creating amazing programs together. So we'll talk about some of that today, but I want to delve into Tammy and some of your choices. We know you as this amazing entrepreneur. Every time I get in a room with you, you're creating something, but just the systems and the processes that you put together always blow my mind. So what inspired you to leave that role in Wall Street and create the Career Winner Circle?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as all good stories go, full of intrigue and drama. And, so I came through the ranks very differently in terms of I didn't go to college. I didn't get my degree until I was 40. And I was a managing director on Wall Street at 35.
Mm.
And so I was typically the only female in the room, up until recently, the youngest female in the room. And I just never felt like I belonged.
Mm.
But because of my background and because I didn't have that degree and I was from a small town in northern New Jersey, I played like I had nothing to lose because I didn't feel like I did.
Mm.
And because of that, and because of some amazing mentors that have been in my life that just kind of get airlifted at the right place at the right time, and people have seen more in me than I did, I built this ability to fail successfully very young
Mm.
and take those risks and recover and collaborate and do all the things because I never felt like I was the smartest person in the room. And that served me very well for the majority of my career. And I loved it. But in that career, I got bored.
Mm.
I would want to move. And so I made 11 major changes and led teams from sales to audit and everything in between. My area of expertise was in the chief operating officer space for transformation, and that's transferable anywhere. So whatever was on fire, whatever the problem was, I'd find myself airlifted in for my team and I to try and get this thing back on the rails. And so that adrenaline junkie in me was fed and fed well and paid very well, as a matter of fact, too. And so I loved it until I remember there was this one day where my career received what I would call a terminal illness that I didn't know was terminal at the time. And I'm sitting in the boardroom We had just finished our earnings call. We had missed earnings again, and we got our clocks cleaned by the investors. And we knew this was going to happen because we missed earnings almost every quarter. And every quarter it turned into a game of hot potato. Whose fault was it that we missed earnings this time? And it
Mm,
really was a game, at least for me, because I, have perspective at that point. And, and I remember somebody making a pot shot at my team saying it was my team's fault. And I was
mm.
like, and usually I would play back. I'm like, okay. And because we'd all go out for beers afterwards, right? This was just how the game was played. And I remember just feeling like I had this out of body experience. When you see in the movies where somebody's floating over the table and they're there, but they're not. And I just felt like I was watching this.
Mm.
My career received the disease that I call I don't give a shit-itis. And I stopped caring about all the things that had fueled me for so long. And so 6 months later, I had cashed out of Wall Street. I had moved to a tropical island off the coast of Belize and started this coaching business. And that will actually be 7 years ago this Friday. So Valentine's Day is our birthday. It was not on purpose. It was when the state of Connecticut decided to do my paperwork. But that was really what fueled me is I've got all of this experience in change and not
Mm.
settling for things that didn't serve me. And I've always lived by the rules that you make the rule for yourself so you can change them. And it was time for me to make that massive disruptive change because going to another organization would have just been a different shade of lipstick on the same situation. And I was not interested in doing that anymore.
Oh my goodness, Tammy, the sound bites. I love her. I used to love. We used to have our weekly meetings with the team, and I love the sound bites. They were. I would always be copiously taking notes of the sound bites, and a few of them I caught today. What we call today quiet quitting was you don't give a itis,
Yes.
and the other thing, not settling for things that don't serve.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty powerful. You said it quickly, but if you let that sort of settle in for a moment, if you're listening, I think sometimes that even I look back in my career, very guilty when I start talking about how long it took me to sort of get there. Part of it was settling for the things that didn't serve and having enough courage to sort of own that and say, okay, enough.
Yes.
And I need to make different decisions so that I can show up differently. The other one was, I love that you said you played like you had nothing to lose. Because in your mind, you didn't. And so then that makes you show up with more boldness and confidence than ever. So love it. And then, of course, translating all that experience into what you say, you got experienced in change really quick. So just a lot of great nuggets for those of you who are listening. We'll, of course, have them posted on Instagram posts for years to come.
And
Tammy,
that's just the first 5 minutes, right? So I can't wait to see what else we cover off on.
Tammy, so, but of course, being faced with a terminal illness, like what you called it, but for real, what about challenges that you faced along the way? And we know not feeling equipped wasn't one of them. So what were some of the challenges that you faced in this transition that you were making?
Oh, it was a hot mess. I made every mistake you could possibly make as a new entrepreneur, and twice because I'm stubborn, right? But slow, not stupid. I get there eventually. Because think about it. Here I was at the height of my career. I had led 2,000 people in 35 countries. I had lived through, not aging myself here because we're not kidding anyone, but, two, maybe three, depending on how you count them, massive
Mm,
economic crisis.
mm,
And so I felt like, okay, starting a business, how hard can this be?
mm,
Turns out not easy because I did a few things on purpose, but that because of those decisions I made, I didn't realize that I had to change how I approach things.
mm,
And the one thing I did specifically with a lot of intentionality when I started this business is I purposely refused to sell business to business for the first 3 years
mm,
because I was still addicted to the work. And I knew that if I went back to my old tribe and did what everybody else does when they start to do their own thing, I would be back in that rat race in no time flat, only under my own shingle instead. And I didn't want that.
mm,
So I specifically created a business that was focused on business to consumer.
mm,
And but the thing was, I built all these things that no one would buy. Like
mm,
I knew that leaders needed to be better transformational leaders. I had seen what a train wreck a lot of these, programs and projects were within various companies. But the individual people did not see that as a gating factor to their success. Now, if I had sold that to corporate, it would have taken off like a house on fire. However, I didn't want to do that. And so I didn't know what a sales funnel was, what an email campaign was, what a lead magnet was, what any of these things were. I had no idea. And so after about, I would say, 6 to 9 months of fumbling around in the dark, trying all the things the experts said to do and failing miserably. So, yep, little bitter buzz on that one. We can talk about that in a minute, but I needed to get some guidance.
Hmm.
I realized that all of my corporate experience was actually doing me more harm than good in this new environment. And quite frankly, I had gotten out of the habit and practice of learning.
Mm.
With even with the high stakes, it's like it was just the same stuff with a different scenario behind it. And so you get to some point in time with your career, you've seen it and done it all. And so it just becomes easy. And so I'd forgotten how to learn. And so, or from an emotional perspective, in terms of not letting these setbacks define you, and in terms of taking on that experimental mindset instead of being so fixed on what needs to happen. And so erasing that learning atrophy and starting to rebuild that muscle again was probably one of the hardest things I had to do as an entrepreneur. But I finally got out of my own way and hired somebody who knew better than I did and really started to help me see the path forward. And ultimately, the beginning, the core part of our business in where our roots are, found me. This is not what I wanted to do, right? I never thought, oh, I want to be a career coach. This will be fun. Like that was never in my mind. But when the executives I had worked with for decades and referrals had come to me and said, I can't move to a tropical island, but I am in the soul crushing grind. I can't take it another minute. I have got houses and spouses and kids in college and all of these things. How'd you do it? And honestly, Tiffany, it took me 2 days to build the signature program that still stands today, that we have served over 500 clients with. Because what I did instinctively, what I did naturally throughout my entire corporate career, I just sat down and thought about it. And I'm like, how did I do this? And so that's where things really started to turn. I hired an expert who could help me get out of my own way and get me there faster. And I went back to what I knew. Instead of delivering what I thought people needed, I just started to listen to what they wanted. And that was really, as an entrepreneur, where the light bulb moment came on and where the growth really started to come in.
That is phenomenal. I think, more drops of wisdom, more nuggets here than we can recap on this session. So we'll definitely provide the transcript. But a couple of things that really stood out that I thought was interesting, and that was how we need to be how we need to be very mindful of our decisions, and also be willing to pivot, and the speed at which we do that, right? So being very agile and having some agility and nimbleness all at the same time. So I sort of see that as a piece of the trajectory for you. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the other one was you weren't afraid to fail. Tell us the name of your signature program.
All right. So the signature program is called the Career Success Blueprint. And what we found is that when you get to that mid to senior level in your career and you're in that soul crushing grind and you're now committed to the industry, you're committed to the income, you're committed to the impact that you make, 100% of our clients that come through know that they don't want to do what they're currently doing. And almost everyone has no idea what they do actually want to do. We lack this level of clarity because we don't actually treat our career like a business. And so one of the secret sauces of the Career Success Blueprint is actually getting people to change that mindset to where they become the CEO of You Incorporated. And when you start to take on that CEO role, you stop playing the victim. You stop thinking the system is not working for me because it's not actually built for you. And you start to take accountability in saying, okay, I run a business for a W-2 and I've done this for decades. Now I need to take those skills and transfer it to me. So think about how we run businesses, right? You've got to have a viable product that's in high demand, right? You've got to be really good at what you do. You've got to have a strong network, a sales team, a marketing team, a product that is, that is definitely innovative and adaptable. And when we start to take those concepts that are just so natural to us when we run our business and apply those to ourselves, then the whole game changes. And that's when that light bulb moment kicks on. And so we don't give ourselves permission. And our big thing, when someone asks me what I do for a living, I don't say I'm a business owner or a coach or any of that. What I do for a living is I help people love Mondays again. And that's what we do. And so we get into this mindset that that's a luxury, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when they start to see that this isn't a pipe dream and that I can pivot to something, I mean, our client results are incredible in that 95% of them are in a new role they've never done before in 4 to 5 months, making about 20% more. And these are high earners because they make, in addition to the CEO of your career, they make one fundamental mindset shift, especially for mid to senior level leaders. When you're at that level, you have the luxury, you have earned the right to move from getting paid for what you do to getting paid for what you know. And when you start to think about the fact that they are not paying you for the 15 minutes it took for you to solve the problem, they're paying you for the 15 years it took for you to be able to solve that problem in 15 minutes. And that's a major shift for leaders when they're like, hang on a second, my value is significant. And I can show up differently. I can make a bigger impact doing the things I love. And there is nothing more exciting than seeing that light bulb moment and seeing people step into a new normal for themselves. It's incredible.
I love what I'm hearing you share in terms of recalibrating the way we think so we find joy in work. And all of that goes back to a fundamental mindset shift. And you may need a coach to help you get there. Number one, to help you get to the root cause of where you're at. You may not even know why.
Right.
And then sort of to move you forward. And from what I just heard you say, it's worth a 20 to 30% pay increase.
I always joke around because I do track our clients, years on, and like
Yeah.
within 3 years, like their high income is now up another 35 to 40%. And I'm like, I'm going to start working for free and just taking a cut.
Hello. I like that model. I like it.
So we've got enough data to prove that it works.
Do you find that this mindset shift is different between men and women?
I do. And I serve about 50 to 50, 50% men, 50% women in terms of our clients. And while the challenges are the same,
Mm-hmm.
the mindset behind it is different.
Talk
Right?
to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. And so one of the big mindset barriers that all people have, I think it's a human condition, not a man or a woman condition, is the concept and the actual belief that I'm going to have to take a step back to do something I love. Like somehow it's this zero-sum game.
Mm.
And I can't have my cake and eat it too. And I think the reason a lot of people feel that way is because they've seen people try and do things like this and do it wrong. And that happens to them. You either lose income, you lose influence, you lose impact, and it doesn't have to be that way if you do it right. But what I find is that there's a fundamental difference between men and women. And we're speaking in general terms here, which is always dangerous. But what I see in terms of themes are that mindset of I have to take a step back to get something that I enjoy. Women have a harder time getting over that mindset shift.
Mhm.
Women have the belief that they have to be better than the role to get it. And we've all seen the data. Men will go for something if it's 70% close, women have to be 120, right?
Mhm.
And that kind of thing. And there's some legitimacy to that in terms of that mindset. Like I was literally having a wrap-up coaching conversation with one of my clients today. And
Mm.
she is a retail powerhouse in terms of operations and walking the floor and seeing inventory. Like this, she's a savant. It's incredible what she can do, and it lights her up.
Ah.
And I'm like, she's looking to get into, she didn't know what she wanted to do. That's why she came to me. And I'm like, okay, we're going to move into the fractional COO space, within the retail industry. And now she has forgotten more than most retail owners know in terms of her big box and her big experience. And she's going after the middle market. And she still wasn't sure that she was qualified. And so I replayed some of our coaching sessions for her when she was lit up and on fire and talking about the things that she loved. And I'm like, does that look like an unqualified executive to you? But and the thing is, most of the time as women, been there myself 100 times, and I still, I still can't get rid of it, but I can shorten the cycle, but we need to give ourselves that permission. We need to believe ourselves that we can do it. Because if we don't believe it, how are we going to get anybody else to? And that's where that mindset shift, I think, is the most difficult, whether we're going for a promotion and, we want to play bigger, we want to make a bigger impact, whether we're going for that board seat, whether we're starting a business, like it doesn't matter what it is. We slow ourselves down, and we're the only ones that do it to ourselves. We're sometimes our own worst enemies.
It's interesting to hear you say that. We're in December, you and I, we went to the Boston Conference for Women, a national conference for women. We saw Oprah in all the glory.
That was so much fun, wasn't it? I love that.
Yes. And we went as exhibitors. We were co-presenting the Own Your Power program. And we talked to hundreds and hundreds of women. And it's interesting when we were looking at the She Rises global survey, I have this big audacious goal to shorten the leadership runway for women from the front door to the top floor in less than 10 years. And we're talking to women. We thought we had 10 themes that were going to be trends for 2025. Out of the 10 themes, 4 remained top of mind to those hundreds of women. And one of them had to do with this sort of permission belief that you're talking about, the confidence in themselves, whether or not they were qualified to move forward, these limiting beliefs. All of them sort of were resonating. Imposter syndrome came up. I think out of the hundreds of women, it had to be 2/3 of the conversations. Most women identified with feeling that way. So as we sort of talk about like what women are grappling with and moving forward, tell me about Own Your Power. Tell them about Own Your Power and how you created sort of this program to help women who were stuck in some of those limiting beliefs.
Yeah, and it's the limiting beliefs, and it's the way we take action. And I think now more than ever, with the rate of change that we're experiencing, like these things are so highly valued. And I've yet to meet a woman that doesn't have it. Right. You just have to uncover it a little bit, right? And give it a little bit more presence on the stage, if you will. And so one of the things I want us to be really clear on, there's 2 things before we start to talk about the power moves and all that kind of fun stuff, but there's 2 things I really want to make sure our listeners lean into today. And one of them is our relationship with failure. And so many of us look at success and failure as opposites, when the reality is you can't succeed without having failed. And so if you're avoiding failure, you're actually preventing success. And so that question then comes in, well, how can I fail without committing career suicide? Right? Because we can only screw up so many things before like we know we're on the way out. And the way we do that is by taking an experimental mindset. And when you take an experimental mindset where you're not fixed on how to get there, but you are fixed on what the goals are, what good looks like, and you take smaller revs and you're transparent about it. So that way your, work frenemies aren't sitting there waiting for you to screw up and say, I told you this wasn't going to work. You're already out there saying, we know that not all of this is going to work, but we're going to do it in small chunks. We're going to test what works, keep that, get rid of the stuff that didn't, try again, and we're going to get there. Because here's why we need to lead like this. Even if you made a perfect decision today, which I don't think is possible, at least it wasn't for me, but even if you could, there's so many dynamic changes that are happening that are completely out of our control. So what was perfect today could be the worst idea ever tomorrow. But Tiffany, you've done some hard time in corporate. How many times have you seen a multi-million-dollar project marching on that everyone knows should have been dead on arrival because no one had the courage to say, this is no longer a good idea? It happens all the time because that one person said, we're taking the hill, we're going this way, and I don't care how many landmines are on that hill, we're going to take it. Versus saying, okay, we need to get to the top of the hill. Yes, right. Let's try and go this way, but we can certainly bob and weave. We start getting blown up a little bit, right? And so, from that perspective, taking that experimental mindset, being inclusive, and admitting that, yeah, of course, these things didn't work. We never expected it all to actually work the first time, is exactly the mindset we need to take as leaders, and to give that permission and create that culture of failing forward is a win, right? Because if you don't, then people will not tell you the truth. You're going to get stuck with surprises that you would have preferred not to have. And everybody pays the price for that, the business, your customers, and everyone's career. So I think that's an important thing for all women to get clear on, because when you can do that, then you can accomplish anything. And I used to always take on what I called the third rail projects.
Love that.
I'm a New Yorker, and in the subway system, the third rail, if you touch it, is the one that kills you. And you would always see, now it wasn't the doormat project. So I see a lot of women busy taking on extra work, thinking it's going to matter, but these are doormat projects. These are projects that aren't important, but no one else wants to do them. Don't do those. Leave those to somebody else who now you know better, do better. And so what these third rail projects are critical projects to the organization that align directly to their goals that everyone is either too afraid to take on or have failed in the past. Because here's the secret. You're not expected to bring this over 100% because no one has.
Ever.
Ever, right? And so if you get it to like 75%, you're a hero. And so that experimental mindset helps with that. Now, the imposter syndrome comes in all the time. I was, again, undereducated for a long time, definitely didn't feel like I belonged where I was. I was there for different reasons that I didn't know. And so my thing is this, I think that the imposter syndrome is good. It shows that you're growing. It shows that you're out of your comfort zone, because comfort kills and complacency kills. But I do think it slows us down. And so the better mindset and the better thing to think about is, how do I shorten the cycle? And how do I know? All right. And I have a name for mine. There was my arch nemesis in high school, and she and I were always, competing for top dog. And so she just drove me nuts all the time. Not going to say it on air. But that is my inner critic name. And so when she starts to fire up, usually when I need confidence the most, then I'll use that name and I'll be like, you need to just, step back. We've had this conversation. We're not having it again. And so from that perspective, your inner critic, I want our listeners to think about in two different ways. When you hear what you're saying to yourself, write it down and read it back to yourself. You'll sound ridiculous, but do this. Because when you do, you're going to find that they fall into one of three categories. Some of the things we say to ourselves, we just know are ridiculous. We just know it. It's like, okay, we're just going to dismiss that because I know for sure that that's not true. But then there's stuff that's legit. And what we want to do is we want to identify, is this a emotional trigger or is it a skill gap? Now, they're both important, but you deal with them differently to shorten the cycle. And so I think between that experimental mindset and having those tools to shorten the cycle for our inner critic, that allows us to do things that are essential as a leader. Mm-hmm. Things like taking bigger risks, making better and faster decisions, trading on our value, not our effort, building a power base, not a network, and being able to speak in an authentic way. So that way we don't feel like we're kind of selling out who we are or being someone that just doesn't feel authentic. And so when you can fail comfortably and fail successfully, when you can shorten those inner critic cycles, those 5 things are essential for leaders, especially today. And that just paves the way to allow you to be able to do that in a much more effective and more fun way.
I think you hit the 5 power moves, but I'm curious I know we've talked about this, where these shifts need to occur. And we're talking to people that are mid-career, late career, that are increasing their revenue because they're making the shifts. And my goal is to shorten that cycle.
Yeah.
So what can we do? What can organizations do to be able to shorten the runway for women from the front door to the top floor, right? Because if you've got all these shifts to make,
yes,
it's going to take a lot longer. Here's the deal. I've been having conversations, and we've been looking at some of the trends for the next generation. So the goal is, let's talk to this generation so we can help the next. And what I'm beginning to uncover, Tammy, is that the next generation is coming to the table with all the confidence and the all the everything that they need in many cases. So how do we help them then get to where they need to go to? They may have confidence in some areas, but you talked about the five power moves. That's not just all about confidence, right?
No, you're
That's
right.
not all
Confidence
about
helps you
confidence.
do the things that you need to do. And it's interesting because I'll argue the point that the next generation does have confidence.
Yeah.
They may come in with confidence, but what we're doing as leaders is we are squashing it. We
Interesting.
are
Let's dig into
crushing
that.
this because it doesn't look like what we have.
Mm.
Right? It doesn't look like you haven't earned your stripes. You don't even know where the break room is yet. How can you possibly know these things?
Pull up
And
your training pants.
you haven't earned your way and all of
Right.
these things. And I just think, we are ruining an amazing opportunity
Mm.
to leverage skills that we don't have, meaning boomers, Gen Xers, that kind
Mhm.
of thing, that companies desperately need. Because here's a newsflash, team: your customers are them.
Yes.
And if you don't have them on your leadership team, you will never relate to your customers. You are dead on arrival. And so, there's a few things that are so interesting. And we're doing a summit in October, which I'm sure we'll talk about, called Disrupted: The Future of Work. And we're thinking about having this debate over the Gen Zers. Are they worth the effort or not? Right? Because it's a lot of drama going on here, and the quiet quitting and all that kind of stuff. And so, but here's some fundamental things as an organization we need to be thinking about. We have seen, I think, significant progress, never enough, but significant attention and effort and progress on equality.
Mhm.
Now, there's an assault on that right now, right? So we can certainly, go down our new dynamics. But here's why creating an equitable business environment for women to thrive makes sense. I've got some data for you that I want to be able to share. So, return on equity in organizations that have CEO as women are 223% compared to their male peers at 130%. STEM innovation revenue for women-led organizations is 35% compared to their male peers at 28. Financial performance is significant, right? The bottom organizations, the bottom 10% of organizations only have 23% women in their leadership ranks.
Mhm.
The top 10% have over 40% of women in their leadership ranks. This is not a feel-good play. And I know this is a She Rises and I am talking to the choir, but here is the reality, right? It makes business sense to do this. But here's where I think we're missing it. And I missed it for a bit in my corporate career until I finally clued into, me benefiting from some mentorship programs. But there's a lot of top talent. There's a lot of women mentors. There's a lot of ERG groups and those types of things. But we are not focusing on what's actually going to move the needle. And so while we're focused on diversity and equity, or equality rather, and parity, what we need to be focusing on is equity. And I don't see equity programs in any company, big or small. And here's what I mean. I saw, because as a white girl, I'm like, all right, what does this actually mean? Right? Let's be honest. And so I only have half of that equation. And so I saw this video on YouTube from John Taylor Cummings. And it was really interesting. It had a bunch of college students, all shapes, sizes, and colors, standing on a line. And he's like, you are going to run a race for $100. Now, when you're in college, $100 is a lot of money. So you're going to put some effort into it. But he said, but you got to stand still. And every time I say something that applies to you, you can take 2 steps forward. And if it doesn't, just stay where you are. And so he started yelling out things like, take 2 steps forward if your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you had a male figure in your life. Take 2 steps forward if you never had to help your parents pay your bills. Take 2 steps forward if you knew your college was paid for, even if you weren't an athlete. And he did all of these things. And you can see the disparity of the line and where these kids were. And he made them all look around. And he's like, here's the deal. Those of you in front didn't get here through any decision that you made. And those of you in the back aren't there for any decisions that you made either. But everyone still has to run their race. And so I think from that perspective, everyone should be able to take 2 steps forward. And as leaders, it's our job to create that environment to where we're not just tooling people and women to be able to be that next leader, but that they've got those battle-tested experiences that make them actually ready, And so I think that's just so important, and we're not doing enough of that as leaders.
Yeah, I really appreciate. I've asked this question consistently to almost every leader that I come in contact with, and we know we know that something needs to be done, and the question is, well, what is it? What do
Yeah.
we think it's going to take to move the needle? And I believe this conversation around number one, how we are showing up
Yes.
to embrace the next generation and to recognize that just because we didn't come up with the model doesn't mean it's not a good one and we shouldn't try it. And then the second one is preparedness. And while they may come with a lot of confidence, there's still preparedness. And if we can't retain that talent at the table, they're not going to deepen their experiences enough to have a seat at the table and make a meaningful impact.
Yeah.
And that is, I think you hit the needle on the head on when it comes to preparedness. And She Rises is not about the feel good thing, and we're also not about a movement. This is not a movement. This is a cultural shift to close the chasm for preparedness, right? For
Yeah.
the next generation. That's pretty powerful. Thank you so much. You were going to say something else. I can feel it.
One of the things that we can do today to change this without having to worry about policy changes in our organizations, without worrying about, HR getting aggravated, without worrying about all these things that we like to, hide behind, right? Is to figure out when you're looking at your bench strength, who's ready now and what does that look like? And when I think about diversity, I want to think about diversity in a different way. I want to think about diversity and diversity of thought, diversity in experience, diversity in backgrounds. Because I will tell you, there was one team I thought it was really funny, especially for me, every single one of my managers, so they were managers of managers, they were executives, every single one of them had a master's degree from an Ivy League school.
Mm.
And they were every shape, size, color, and background you can imagine. So they checked all the HR boxes, but they thought as one unit
Mm.
because they didn't have that diversity and experience, right? They've all had this, silver spoon kind of do this, do this, do this, do this, and then you go work and then you do all the other things. And so while it was, bookmark, diversity, I couldn't get somebody to get out, think out of the box. I hate that term, but that's the only one that comes to mind right now, to save my life. And I'm like, okay, we got to turn this upside down. And so I brought in some other leaders that were actually considered a bit scrappy, control. And then the group decision making, the dynamics, the testing, the challenging, the assumptions, the blind spots started to lift. And so, but the one thing we would always do is we would look at our talent and be like, who's ready now? And if there wasn't at least 2 ready now people for every single one of my leaders, and then down the chain 3 levels, then we weren't doing our job. And if those ready now were not a diverse enough population in terms of gender, whether it's, defined or undefined, and whether it was, ethnic background, where they grew up, what country they're from, I think we need to start to really attack some of these challenges that we have within our businesses with a much more open and broad perspective.
Mm. I love it. As we start to sort of wind down, a couple more questions, and one is around this train of thought you're going. How do you see the role of career coaching in creating more inclusive and diverse workspaces?
It's interesting. One thing happened when I released the book, right? So I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second, but I released a book called Escaping the Career Trap last January. So it's been a year. And the book is written for the disenfranchised worker, right? The subtitle is Transform Apathy into Ambition and Never Hate Mondays Again. So if you hate Mondays, you need to read the book. And the one thing I never expected was that companies are now paying me to come and deliver this message to their organizations.
Mhm.
I was like, you do realize the first 2 chapters talk about how messed up everything is and that it's all your fault, right? You know this. And they're like, yes, yes, we know, but these other things. And so while we have leaders, I think that are kind of left holding the bag, right? Leaders get a bad rap in terms of toxic environments and, you know, and burnout and stress, and we don't have balance and all of these things. But when we start to change the dynamic a little bit, and when we start to not only empower, but to expect individuals to treat their career like a business, things start to change. And the interesting thing that I've seen, which I never expected, is when leaders get out of the way, and start to focus on. So one of the things I like to talk about is employee engagement doesn't work.
Mm.
Full stop. We have 20 years of data and billions of dollars and time and hours invested to prove to us globally that focusing on employee engagement does not work. I saw a Gallup survey last week. We are at an all-time low. I don't think we've been this low in terms of engagement since 2019, and it's never, since they've started to record this, been above 35%. So something is wrong here. So let's think about something differently. And so when you tap into an individual's aspirations, what gets them out of bed in the morning, regardless of what they do for a living, and you take that and you apply that to your company's biggest challenges, and you give them the accountability, the training, and the capability to treat their career like a business, it is magic. And there's massive improvement in terms of retention, customer satisfaction, quality, productivity, revenue, profitability. All of these numbers go up fast. And so one of the things that we need to start to think about is, how do we lean into that untapped talent that's lying dormant within our organizations? Gallup did 2 surveys I thought were really interesting. One was of global knowledge workers saying how much, how satisfied are you with your job? 80% said they were satisfied. I'm like, that's pretty high. I didn't think I'd see that. Then they asked another survey is, how much do you actually care about what you do? That number went down to 20%. 60% of our working population is walking around in this apathetic haze. Things are good enough. My boss is okay. I only have to go back to the office 2 days a week instead of 5 like my friends. It doesn't hurt that bad. I'm paid kind of enough, but they don't care. That is killing careers, that is killing companies, and it doesn't have to happen this way. And that's really what we're all about in terms of helping reshape how we think about empowerment, accountability, but leaning into the things that actually light you up. And everyone who's listening today, I'd be curious to know and ask yourself, on Sunday, are you excited for what you have coming up on Monday? Or are you rolling your eyes saying, I can't suffer these fools another minute? Because if you're in that spot, I guarantee you your team is too. And it's so easy to turn that around and make it meaningful for everyone.
I love it. Okay, so you gave me a few answers. I told you we asked that question over and over again, and I knew that you were going to sort of nail that one for leaders who are watching. I really appreciate that. I want you to think about, looking back. Like, what would you tell your 25-year-old self, Tammy, as we start to sort of wind down?
Yeah. There are 2 things I would tell my 25-year-old self.
What's that?
Funny enough, one of them wouldn't have been go to college. So that's not something I would have told myself, right? I think one of the things I definitely would have told myself was that perspective is critical.
Mm.
We back ourselves into these life and death situations. We treat every email like it is saving someone's life. And this always on culture, and I was the victim of this, not a victim, willing participant, let's use the right word, in terms of creating this sense of urgency about everything. And the reality, I'm at financial services, right? So let's be honest, we are, not everything is drop dead important or urgent. And so had I known that earlier, it would have actually accelerated my career.
It's funny you say that. I used to be in the business, when I started in HR officially, formally for a multi-billion-dollar company, we created the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, but the company made lotion, for goodness sake. And so I mean, but it's the lotion that everybody loves to buy today.
Sure, but let's face it can wait till Monday.
But can I tell you the stress and anxiety that everyone had for these executive meetings, for new product development, for getting the jet to go on merchant trips? And it was lotion, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
So when we begin to put perspective around, what it all means and why we're doing what we're doing, it certainly does help. Great piece of advice. You said you had 2 pieces of advice.
One more thing, and I think this is, we'll bring it home with this one in an interesting story. And so I think the second thing I would have loved to have told my 25-year-old self that I didn't find out until I was about 45 is that I actually belonged.
Mm.
I didn't look like anyone else. I didn't think like anyone else. I didn't have the same background as anybody else. And I spent all my time trying to pretend I was just like everyone else. And this literal epic moment happened in my career where, we're in the middle of financial crisis and I had to go into a person's office that was 3 or 4 levels above me and try and convince him to do something in the EU that I knew he would not want to do. And so I don't know how I got there. I think I just drew the short straw. So I'm in there and we're starting to talk. And then, of course, we start to raise our voices and I'm terrified, but I am screaming right back at him because that's how we communicate and trying to hold my own. And the phone rings. And I know he did this on purpose. I know it. His admin puts it through and he puts it on speaker. And on the other end of the line, I hear, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I basically hear, "Hey, dude, how'd I do last night?" And my jaw dropped. It was John McCain after his first debate with Barack Obama. And these guys sat there broing out for 20 minutes on how he did in the debate. I'm like, what am I doing here? Are you kidding me? Right. And I am listening and trying not to look like an idiot. And I'm sure that my face, I have a terrible poker face. So I'm sure that the shock and awe was very clear. He hung up. We continued our argument. I lost. I went into my boss's office.
Mm.
And I closed her door, but it was glass office. So people could see me pacing back and forth like a lunatic. And I'm sure they're ready to call security. And so I was like, why am I here? I'm not an attorney. I'm not this. I don't do this, blah, 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 all these things. And she just let me go for a bit. And then, she started to giggle and she's like, "Are you done yet?" And I was just like, and that started to make me laugh. And so I'm like, "Yes." And she goes, "Sit down. You are here because you are not like the others. You are here because you weren't part of the problem. You're here because you're willing to test and challenge and try new things." And she's like, "You are here because you're different. And that's why I need you here." And it took me a few months to believe it and to see and kind of test and prove and challenge that out. But my entire career, when I was trying to blend in, the reason I was there is because I stood out.
Tammy, sort of being able to own your place in the room. People always use that expression, seat at the table.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Sometimes people get a seat at the table. They don't stay there long enough because they don't feel like they belong.
Mm-hmm. You don't look like anybody else, right? So yes.
Yeah, so that's great advice. I really appreciate you sharing that. Tell me what is on the horizon for you as you start to think about your personal brand and moving that forward. I love your mission to empower professionals through career agility, and I love the book. So, can you talk a little bit about your vision for Career Winner Circle, for the upcoming Disrupted Future Work Conference, and for
Fun,
Escaping the
right?
Career Trap?
Yeah, absolutely. And so some of the big things that we've got coming up now is we're still staying to our core in terms of helping mid to senior level leaders pivot out of that soul crushing grind and love every Mondays again. But now we are taking the other side of that. We've spent 7 years helping your leaders quit their job. And so now we're going to explain to you why they're leaving you and who they're going to and how you can be that company that people are gravitating towards. And, we serve clients from all different segments, but I really feel like the middle market has the most to gain or lose here. And so, if you're in an organization where your top talent is leaving, if you're in an organization where 60% of them are in an apathetic haze, no matter what you do, another pizza party, my friend, is not going to fix this. But we have created a solution called Amplify 360 that solves this problem in 3 months. So when you start to take a different approach, when you work with the individuals to talk about how to become that CEO of their career, you talk about the leaders and you work with the leaders to teach them how not to screw this up. And then you work with the executive team and the board to make sure that the tone from the top, the policies, and everything else that's going on is taking the company in the right direction of travel. And you do this at the same time in a very disrupted way. Business is still running, but people's minds are spinning. But when you do this and it's fast and it's adrenaline rush, it's fun, things change quickly. So I'm super excited about Amplify 360, which we launched this year. And then as you know, as a carry on over last year. So last year we did a virtual summit called Disrupted the Future of Work. And quite frankly, I didn't want to do it. Right. The coaches wanted to do it. They're like, this will be fun. I'm like, that's not the word I would use. You remember? And I was like, all right, we'll do that. And so we had great speakers and tons of attendees, and it was really impactful. And so this year we're doing a live event in New York, in addition to the virtual event that we'll be doing a few weeks later. And this will be in October. But I want you to think about, this is the anti-summit. Oh, I love the hearts. I love the hearts. Thank you. This is the anti-summit. This is not the conference. This is not where you go, listen to a keynote, attend 3 tracks, have lunch, attend 3 tracks, drink, go home, and forget everything you learned. What this is now is it is an experience. And so this will absolutely be a future of work experience where you are bringing your business problems today and you are solving them with future forward solutions with experts who have different points of view, who are going to be working with you on different ways to solve those problems, and with new tech and fun things like that to play with. We're literally having a playground. So when we're envisioning this, it's very much think tank meets adult playground. And so new concepts to solve current problems and new ways to get your hands into everything so you can continue to make the impact for your organization that you know you're here to make. And so I'm super excited about that.
I can't wait. I'm so excited that I won't be in Japan for this conference.
Oh.
For the unconference, this experience is going to be mind-blowing. If you are listening, this Tammy, we're going to make sure that we continue to promote the conference, the unconference. We were super excited. I was super excited to be with you when we unveiled part of this at the Boston Conference for Women. Women were super excited. Female leaders, all executive female leaders, mind you, were super excited about being able to participate. They were so excited to win this conference ticket.
I know we do have a grand prize winner, so that's great.
Yes. So really excited about that. Before I go, we have the Escaping the Career Trap as a book that everyone should read. But Tammy, what are you feeding your soul with so that we can add to our book list?
Okay, so right now I am rereading. So sometimes I like to go back to my all-time favorites. Born to Rise by Deborah Kenny.
Excellent.
And it just, it's such a amazing story about entrepreneurship within a company. And it's told through the lives of bringing students into that mindset. And so I just think there's so much to learn from different avenues. We tend to get really stuck in corporate or nonprofit or, and those kind of things. And so I just love to mix up the perspectives and stuff. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Awesome. And as we close this out, do you have one word that you would sum up your view of leadership with?
Impact.
Powerful. You heard it here, everyone. As we wrap up today's enlightening conversation, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to you, Tammy, one of my mentors.
Always a pleasure.
A friend, a partner in crime.
All the things.
All the things.
Martini sharing partner, all the things, right?
Yes. So I want to thank you for sharing your invaluable insights and experience with us. You really overflow and you consistently do the giving that you give to your clients. As if anybody's listened, they see what it's all about. So thank you very much. And your journey and dedication to transforming careers is inspiring. Okay, everybody, this is a wrap. At Virtual Partner, we're committed as well to transforming workplaces into hubs of innovation and inclusivity. And we recognize we can't do it alone. We need amazing stories like the one you just heard from our wonderful Tammy Alvarez of the Career Winning Circle. We're on a mission to gain some insights from stories like you that are listening worldwide so that we can better understand both triumphs and challenges that women face in the workplace. Your voice matters. So before you go, if you were inspired by what you heard today and you want to join us on our mission to empower women leaders, don't forget to participate in the She Rises annual Global Impact Survey at virtualpartner.biz/how she rises. And you're participating in this particular survey will help to shape the future discussions that we have right here on our show, but also help to shape the future of women in leadership roles. I believe together we can create a future where equity prevails and every woman has the opportunity to rise. Thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of She Rises. Stay inspired, stay empowered, keep rising. Until next time.
That's a wrap for today's episode of She Rises. I hope you found inspiration, insight, and the motivation to keep pushing forward on your leadership journey. Remember, success isn't about reaching the top. It's about lifting others as you rise. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other powerhouse women in your life. Follow me, Tiffany-O, and Virtual Partner for more resources on leadership, organizational growth, and creating workplaces where humanity thrives. Until next time, keep rising, keep leading, and keep making an impact.